Welcome to the Nonprofit Voice, which is brought to you by Nonprofit Pro, the go-to resource for nonprofit management and strategy. In each episode, we'll sit down with nonprofit executives, consultants, and technology partners to learn more about the latest tactics, strategies, and trends in the nonprofit sector. As always, you can download all Nonprofit Voice episodes on Apple, Google, and Spotify. To be the first to know of new episode releases, follow us on social media and subscribe to our e-newsletter.
Welcome back, everyone. Mark Becker here, founding partner of Cathexis Partners. Today, we're going to talk about the Pulse of the Donor benchmark report that Fundraise recently put out. And I'm a geek and a total nerd for numbers, but it's a benchmark report of over 1,000 nonprofits across 4 countries, the US, Canada, United Kingdom, and Australia, and everything normalized to the US currency. Look forward to getting in and talking about it with today's guests. Speaking of which, Tara, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Tara Broughel. I'm a senior customer success manager at Fundraise Up. I've been with Fundraise Up for about a year, and my job is really to help my customers raise as much money as possible. I always like to say my job is to help them meet and exceed their fundraising goals, and sometimes that's in being a thought partner or strategic fundraising guidance, and sometimes that's more on platform optimization. But, my job is to help them have success with the platform. I come to Fundraise Up having spent virtually all my career working in the nonprofit sector. So I spent 14 years at UNICEF USA, loved every minute of it there. And my most recent job at UNICEF USA, my title was Senior Director of Digital Marketing and Digital Revenue. So, working on the digital fundraising team, email fundraising, SMS-based fundraising, paid digital. We onboarded Fundraise Up during that time. So I was a user of Fundraise Up, a customer. So I sort of have sat on both sides of the aisle here. And then after I left UNICEF in 2022, I went to work at a digital agency called Stagecoach Digital, and we did digital consulting, fundraising strategy for nonprofits. So I worked with some organizations like National Audubon Society and Wildlife Conservation Society. So, I've sort of worn a few different hats, I guess I should say, in this space.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about the pulse of the donor here today. I think there's a lot to digest, but I think one of the things that has sort of jumped out to me as like the trend worth monitoring is what we're framing as this paradox year where average gift declined, but conversion went up, overall revenue went up, and the number of gifts went up. And so we've actually been having this conversation with a lot of our customers previous to the Pulse of the Donor coming out. This has sort of been a trend that several of my customers have sort of seen in their data, and I think we're sort of helping them digest it. But I don't think it's a trend that people should be scared of, seeing average gift go down. I think it's actually in some ways kind of exciting because more people than ever are coming to give, right? We're seeing more donations, we're seeing more transactions, we're seeing more people open to making gifts just at smaller amounts. And I think a lot of that is reflective of where and how they're making their donations and some donor psychology and donor behavior there. So excited to digest more of this, with you today.
Yeah, that theme does continually kind of pop up through all the numbers. But yeah, let's go ahead. Matt, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, hi, Mark. Hi, Tara. My name is Matt Bowe, and I'm the Director of Strategic and Enterprise Customer Success at Fundraise Up. I come from a background of building and leading customer success teams in technology in the nonprofit space in Fortune 500 companies, as well as in global hospitality. I've been here for about 7 months, and I'm privileged to be able to work with Tara and our team as we lead our customers through the journey of optimizing their donor outcomes and maximizing their revenue potential for the organizations that they serve. And, we have been talking a lot about this report. We're very excited about this report in the marketplace. We're looking forward to sharing more of the thoughts around how we will be using the report with our customers. And I think one of the big picture items that we are looking at in this report is making sure that our customers are optimizing that donor journey. For the first time, mobile is over 50% in the volume of donations that are coming through the channels of the organizations that were included in the report. And yet mobile, the amount of each individual mobile donation is down. So you want to make sure that you can look at that very key statistic in the framework of your entire donor journey and all of your strategies and maximize your potential to take that often one-time donor and convert them into a sustainer.
Yeah, I think that was one thing that really jumped out at me is over half the donations are coming through online. When I first was read that, I was like, yeah, that's been people have been doing that for a bit. And I'm like, oh no, wait, that was just kind of using site visiting and using visiting the site at all. But donations had always still been predominantly on the desktop. So having that flip finally and majority of the donations come through mobile, that is a seismic shift, right? And kind of speaks to the smaller gifts. It makes sense. If someone's there, they're excited about it, they're in the moment, and it's hopefully easy to make that donation, right? And that's what a lot of the trend just keeps on popping up. Just make it streamlined, make it easy, make it accessible, let people give their way. So I think, yeah, the report really just speaks volumes to ease of use, right?
Yeah, and that really is foundational to who we are at Fundraise Up. Our founder, Peter Burns, often says that he wants to make sure that donating to a nonprofit is just as easy as ordering pizza. For mobile donations in 2025, the average time to donate was 123.5 seconds, and that is significantly lower than the desktop time to donate. So donors are looking for a friction-free experience. They're looking to be able to make that donation in a moment when they are feeling something very often. And when your donor comes to you in that moment where they feel that connection to your organization, you want to make sure that that experience is frictionless and gets them into your pipeline so that you can manage their life cycle in a thoughtful and fruitful way for your organization.
Some of the graphs around social media and which ones are really taking off. TikTok,
Hmm.
to see that just such a huge spike in yes, it seems like it's smaller amounts, right? But again, it's just going with that, or maybe it's not as many sustained gifts. One of those factors, if not both of them. But I thought that was really interesting.
I think there's some relationship between the mobile trend and some of the social numbers we're seeing. To Matt's point, people are on mobile, they're checking out quickly. I think sort of one of my hypotheses here is that they're spending time on their social apps and they are taken to a donation form through either an organic or a paid experience through, TikTok or Facebook were really the two primary social channels that we saw quite a bit of success with. And so I think this idea around the lower average gift amount is definitely really related to the fact that like people are giving on their phones, more than 50% of people are giving on their phones, and more than ever we're seeing social media start to drive conversion, and in particular we are seeing a relationship between people who come in through social and people who become recurring givers. But one of the important, caveats to that is that we really are seeing more of more of this social conversion over like a 60 or 90-day outlook. So I think one of the things, the average gift conversation, in some ways we need to extend it out to like what is the average gift or what is the average amount people are giving over the course of their first 60 or 90 days, not just at the first point of transaction.
And I
So I do
love that
think a
they're,
lot of these trends are very interrelated, like social,
yeah.
mobile, smaller gifts.
And the report digs into, and that's why organizations need to rethinking how they're reporting on and analyzing their data, right? It's not just
Yeah.
that first gift, it's what are they doing in those first 90 days that seem
Yep.
really important.
Yeah. I think the first 90 days are critical. I mean, look, I think most organizations have welcome experiences at this point, but I think one of the things people are going to have to think about is how are you personalizing these welcome experiences, these welcome journeys based on the channels people are coming in on? Do you have the resources and the infrastructure to start to do that? It does take resources, right? But I think we'd argue that it's an investment worth making. I don't think these trends are going away, and the level of personalization and the data that you're going to have about your donors is only going to get more complex and more complicated. So, it's worth making that investment now.
Well said. Speaking of trends, AI, right? That's the buzzword of the year, probably the decade. And, we're seeing it in different places. Where are you seeing, actual progress with AI in the space? And what's the numbers kind of showing?
Well, I do believe that like the biggest value of AI is in just personalization of the experience for the
Hmm.
donor and using the data we have about you to personalize the checkout experience to get you to convert. So I that is primarily through, what's the ask array we're going to show to Tara versus Mark versus Matt, and then what is the frequency we're going to suggest to Tara versus Matt versus Mark, based on the data we have about them, where they live, what device they're on, do they have an e-wallet enabled on their phone, their browsing history, how many times have they come back to the organization's website. So to me, the value of AI is in personalizing that experience for them and, and getting them the exact right experience to get them to the point of conversion.
Yeah, and we, with our customers, certainly see a large degree of success with some of our AI tools, such as adaptive cost coverage and other tools that make the process easier. I think the biggest danger with AI that we all must look out for is just making sure that we don't put ourselves into a position where we are increasing friction or limiting choice. Back to the example that I gave a few minutes ago, when that moment comes that I want to make my donation, I may be making that donation at the end of a very long day. I may be making that donation in the middle of something else between meetings. Maybe I'm doing it on the subway as I'm headed to
Mhm.
work or I'm headed to pick up my kids. Anything that increases friction in that moment is going to jeopardize both my experience as a donor as well as my willingness to give. And so, what AI done right is all the things that Tara just mentioned, absolutely. And it's also done right in service of decreasing the friction in the experience and allowing me to flow through that process as seamlessly as possible.
Yeah, having the reports show that orgs raise 10 to 15% more using AI suggested gifts. I mean, that's big. That's needle moving, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and again, with adaptive cost coverage on our platform, we are seeing, incredible rates of cost coverage for our customers that are using that AI feature, and that's a suggestive AI feature. And so we absolutely are excited to continue to invest in AI. We have been a leader in that space. I think that all platforms are invested in making sure that AI is a part of their strategy. And many of our customers are making sure that they're integrating AI with their digital strategies as well as other strategies that they bring to market. And again, the key piece that we want to make sure that we're doing is we're keeping the donor engaged and we are not removing them from the experience. And when we do that, AI tools can be incredibly powerful and produce some pretty outstanding donation volume results for nonprofits and NGOs.
I also like the stat about when the platform determines whether to ask a donor to cover the transaction fees or not, 87% say yes. I mean, that's huge. That's the 3%. So those numbers all add up and make a difference, right?
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah, and then even little things, well, not little things, but great little features, Apple one tap checkout, those kind of things are all moving the needle just a little bit. And like you're saying, Matt, make it more frictionless and really helping additional donations come in. And I think it's all very interesting numbers around that.
Yeah, I think the e-wallets are an important and growing, if you look at all giving, like credit card is still, the lion's share, but Apple Pay in particular is really growing. And I think as we pass this 50% threshold of people giving on mobile, having like smart features where the form recognizes that you're on a device that knows that Apple Pay is enabled or Google Pay is enabled is really critical to getting, I think Matt said the average time to time to conversion for mobile was 123 seconds. So there are going to be people who are converting in 30 seconds. And so it's going to be like a one click kind of experience. And with those kind of tools, you can also skip some things like, mailing address, for example. to make sure that it's as frictionless a checkout as possible. So I definitely think that having smart features that understand what device you're on and whether to show Apple Pay or Google Pay based on that is only going to get more important.
And then allowing the self-help with the donor portal and allowing more options inside of there, right? The ability to pause instead of cancel. 337% increase people that paused versus cancel. That's a huge thing. Okay, let's just take a break here. I've got some big expenses coming up, but we're still in a relationship. I think those are really key features to have. And any other thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, here again is an area where AI is driving positive impact. On our platform, for example, the pause to cancel feature is embedded in the platform, and we generate AI suggestions for ideal incremental amounts. And, when you think about it, the Pulse of the Donor report, when you look at the decline in average monthly gifts, it was 5.3%. However, there was a 9% increase in donors that opt for recurring, right? So a decline in that recurring process, whether it be by amount or whether it be due to a pause, is not necessarily a negative thing. It can be something that can allow you to take another look at that donor and take a look at specific life cycle treatment plans that will help that donor along and keep them within your file and increase your long-term value.
Yeah, and I would just say that the cancel flow doesn't just give them the opportunity to pause. It also says, would you prefer to decrease your amount? And I think it's the same thing, which is that you want to retain these people. And so it's a win if they pause or if they decrease their amount. My customers ask me all the time, like, should we allow people to cancel on the donor portal? And I always say yes. So you can use these tools to better retain them. I think it's a net win. I also just think like, people want to trust, they want to trust your charity and they want to trust your brand. And so this is a reflection of your brand and that relationship that you have with a monthly donor. So I just feel like in the year 2026, like that's what a that's what a donor and a supporter sort of expects of
Mhm.
the organization, or these kind of features. Like you can do it on your Netflix subscription. Why couldn't I do it with my charitable subscription too? So
Exactly. And yeah, you're right. Everybody checks it, it kind of compares the checkout process to buying tickets to a concert or, and
yep.
checking out on Amazon. It needs to be flow, it needs to make sense, it needs to be really easy. Okay. One of the other big things I noticed was the end of year giving and Giving Tuesday and what the numbers actually show and what the ask should be, right? It's all about at the end of the year, it's obvious based on the findings that that's when people give one-time larger
Mhm.
gifts
Mhm.
versus recurring sustained giving, setup. So at the end of the year, make the message clear, right? The call to action is give.
Mhm.
And then the rest of the year, the other 3 quarters, you can focus on, getting those sustained givers or close. That's, everybody's goal is to move them up the ladder and make them lifelong donors, but don't cause friction, right? Don't go against the grain. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in the US in particular, like we know a lot of people are coming to take advantage of the tax deduction. And
Yeah.
so, if you have that in mind, they're coming to make a larger one-time gift in all likelihood. So I would say most of my customers, like they have like a recurring first approach, January through October kind of thing, and then November, December, you know, shift to getting those larger one-time gifts. It's not everyone, like every organization is like a snowflake. They're all a little bit different, but I would say that like that's what a lot of my organizations are doing, and I think that's borne out by the data we see.
Yeah, again, it's the focus on that long-term value and making sure that you have put together a donor life cycle that allows that donor to move from the one-time giver, whether it be at year end or at Giving Tuesday or at any other time, through your ecosystem to become a recurring donor and then to give them the tools to, Tara, I thought you made a great point, give them the tools that allow them to manage their relationship as a donor with you. That builds trust and that builds a sustainer that is far more reliable donor than if you restrict that individual or you place them into a certain box that doesn't allow them to escape.
Well said. Yeah, those were kind of the ones that jumped out to me. Any final thoughts or anything we didn't cover?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the major sort of recommendations coming out of this was like just make sure you're investing in your infrastructure and your tech stack. I also think it just really shows the importance of like really making sure your CRM data is clean, it's hygienic. Like that's not the sexy stuff, but like if your data isn't clean, you're not going to be able to give someone an excellent donor journey. You're not going to be able to upsell them properly because, your wires will get crossed. So it's investing in your tech stack, it's making sure your data is clean. I do think that like having a strong digital infrastructure is just like a must have for any organization in 2026, no matter where you're based.
Well said. Matt, how about yourself?
Make sure that as you're building your strategy, you are pressure testing that strategy both within your organization, within your current donor set, within your data and technology structures, and with your partners. And I think that we win together and take advantage of all of the partners in your ecosystem who are there to work with you to maximize your donor's journey and maximize the results for your organization.
Excellent. The pulse of the donor from Fundraise Up, not just showing you numbers, it's showing you why it's important and what you can actually take action on. So really appreciate your time today, and thank you everybody for joining us.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening. Listen to more episodes at nonprofitpro.com as well as on Apple, Google, and Spotify.